I agree. I think that, I've always taken that approach. Anyone can learn the law. If you want legal advice, and that's a very specific term, you go to a lawyer, clearly. But there's so much about data protection law that is what we call compliant. If you distinguish kind of compliance, practical on the ground compliance from legal advice, then you don't have to be a lawyer. You can understand what the law requires from an organization. You can read and understand regulator guidance. You can look at what different organizations do, talk to your peers, understand different approaches, and from that toolbox, help whoever it is you're helping from an organization point of view with their compliance. And the difference for me is if you want legal advice or litigation, you have to get the lawyers in, and they play a particular role and an important role, and we absolutely need them. Some people misinterpret my comments as lawyer bashing, and they absolutely not, and they never have been. Many of the people I admire most in privacy have been privacy lawyers, data protection lawyers. They're fantastic. I just think that sometimes they do something different to what a non-lawyer data protection officer or something does. That's the point I'm making, that you don't have to be a lawyer to be in that practical compliance role. A lot of the time, if you are advising someone, you're not just saying this is what the law requires. You're part of the business. Even as a consultant, you're there to work with them to get them to the right place, to get them to the right outcome. So it isn't enough even to just communicate what the law requires. You've got to, or what the regulator expects in some cases, where that's where the details filled in. You're there to help them on the journey and get there. And so you don't just deliver your advice and disappear. You're very much then, as you say, communicating to different people in different roles in the organization. What's their bit in this? Because it's rarely just one person who has to do something. You often involve different bits of the business, and different people have to do different tasks on whatever the topic or project is. So yes, you've communicated, but then you're working with them because you're there as the subject matter expert. So if you tell them they need to achieve X, and then they go off and say, okay, well, we could do it like this. What do you think? Would that work? At that point, you can't kind of stand back and say, oh, I've told you what you need to require, what the requirements are, what you need to do. You have to get on with it. You have to be more involved than that. You have to kind of give an opinion. And as a consultant, you're a bit of a step removed, because ultimately all the decisions do have to be made by the organization. And if you're in-house, there's some people who would argue that that's the same. The data protection officer, even in-house, is only there to advise. But it's just not reality. Anyone who's worked in-house as a data protection officer knows you can't be hands-off. You're an employee. You're paid by the organization. You're part of the team. You've got to be a team player. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're making decisions and signing off on things that the business should be, but you're an integral part of working together with people to get to a place where everybody's happy to some degree or another. And you still end up as an in-house DPO in a place where you think, well, I'd rather you did path A, but you've chosen path B. Fine, that's your decision. But I've told you what the options are. I've informed you of the requirements. I've explained the risk. And ultimately, you've decided to do B instead of A. If it was me, I'd do A, but it's not my call, so you do B. But actually, in doing B, we've got somewhere which was better than where we were. I've done my job in advising you. You played your role as the organization in making the final call and taking the risk and responsibility if that turns out not to be good enough. That's just how it works. That's realistic to me. So, you have to have a whole rake of skills. And very often, a lot of what you do as an in-house DPO is you bring the right people together. It's amazing how much of your job is getting this bit of the organization to talk to that other bit of the organization who are either doing the same thing and they didn't realize, or who need to be brought together for a project, but they haven't quite realized it yet. There's a lot of silo working in organizations, and people in legal compliance, those kind of roles, sometimes information security, end up being the ones who actually get the right heads around the table, who aren't previously talking to each other to make some progress or to get to the outcome or whatever it is.